spending the next hour talking about Guyana. Is it today an apartheid state?
I'm happy that you were very specific in noting that there are no laws and there's no ascension to the books to say that this is now legal for this to happen. But when we examine how Guyanese are treated, I'm sure we get into that discussion further. I pay attention to what is now the zeitgeist in this nation, the whole spirit behind it, what's happening.
Yes.
And what we see is that there is a distinct discrimination between Afro-Guyanese and those of Indian descent. And I'm careful to note that those who are supporters of the PPP civic, because they may be of Indian descent, and if they do not support the PPP civic, then they are treated as if they are.
Absolutely. I think the Guyanese government is ruled by an apartheid regime. The PPP government, I see apartheid more broadly than the way you discussed. I think apartheid not only has to do with segregation, but it has to do with subjugation and marginalization of a people. Brought African Guyanese under subjugation. They use the police force to enforce that subjugation, like the racist South African government did. They're conducting economic genocide where they're marginalizing Afro-Guyanese from the economy.
And the competition for the wealth means that all the ethnic groups in the country will line themselves up to get a part of the wealth. If we construct systems and institutions to encourage the equitable distribution of wealth, then we would not have to deal with the charges of
their supporters to be employed and to get money. So all in all, what I see with this budget is a way for the government to transfer the wealth of the country to their ethnic supporters while they continue to drive Black people into impoverishment. And one of the main aspects of apartheid is racial, political, and
economic
social segregation
and economic discrimination. Yes.
Ethno-racial advantages in the society. The state is in the business of doing that, of creating ethno-racial advantages. And so you're creating different classes of people. Let me end with this, Brother Norman. We hear people say all the time, look, they have Indian poor people. And I do agree they have Indian poor people. And they have Black poor people and they have Amerindian poor people. But their conditions are different.
No one was held accountable for the killing of hundreds of young Black people. No one was held accountable for the shooting of the Static News reporter. No one has been held accountable for the shooting into the homes of Bostonians. Whenever police commits atrocities under the PPP regime, they are happy, they encourage it. It's not investigated, no one is punished. I don't care what they call me. I know that Black people in Guyana will not be subjugated. They will not drive us into. We do not live on their plantation. We live in a country that we belong to, where our foreparents built. The slaves built Guyana. The Indians from India, who are the PPP support base, came and met us in Guyana. We own Guyana just like them. And they're not going to drive us out of Guyana. If they want, they can take an island and go live there by themselves, if they don't want to live in peace and harmony with us. But we will not be subjugated. Guyana will not become a PPP colony. We will.
Well, now I pray for this world to be a better place. Living in love, one people, one race. Stop all your killing, all your bloodshedding. Accept love, my brothers and sisters, cause in this world of hate, there is poverty, shame, and disgrace. There'll be no more existence of the human race if we don't cool down our haste. Yeah.
Welcome to another edition of Voice of the Diaspora. As Guyana descended into an apartheid state, in studio with me this evening is Apostle Nigel London a community activist and president of CGID, Mr. Rickford Burke. These two honorable gentlemen are no stranger to us and to you. And therefore, we will be spending the next hour talking about Guyana. Is it today an apartheid state? Rickford Burke, president of CGID, welcome to Voice of the Diaspora. Apostle Nigel London, community activist, welcome to Voice of the Diaspora.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
The question, this is a burning question, and many are saying that we are today in apartheid in Guyana. Of course, apartheid or separate development is a policy or system of segregation or discrimination on the grounds of race. While South Africa in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s would have instituted laws to make those discriminatory and racist practices legal, in Guyana we see the same practices happening without being instituted into law. And this is the framework in which we have to examine whether the manifestations of discrimination, racism, the denial of lands and economic prowess to one ethnic group, whether that is apartheid, whether it is manifested as apartheid. So I want to welcome both of you gentlemen to the program, and I will begin with Apostle Nigel London, and the same question that is posed to Apostle Nigel London will be the same question that will be posed to Mr. Burke. Apostle Nigel London, apartheid in Guyana, true or false?
Well, again, I'm grateful for being able to share this platform with you and with Mr. Burke. I'm always grateful when I have the opportunity to speak to any matter that relates to what happens in Guyana. I've heard quite a few individuals have discussions along this, and I was actually sitting on a panel once when this was raised, because the fact that the question arises speaks to the concern of many Guyanese, especially those of African descent, about the glaring disparity in which we are encountering what they call the oil wealth and development and what spins off from that. However, if I hold fast to or if we should hold fast to the actual definition, or we should establish, and I think you began to do so, what is the actual definition of the term apartheid? And if we restrict ourselves and confine ourselves to that, then Guyana is certainly descending into that and has already been there, if we look at it in the context that there are certain groups of people in reference to ethnicity that are more highly favored than others. We are not yet on a national scale dealing with physical segregation of ethnic groupings, but we're dealing with economic segregation, which is why I seek to speak this as economic apartheid, where persons are denied development economically just because of their ethnicity. And we're seeing the Indo-Guyanese population, who are friends more than anything, they are thriving and enjoying the hog of what we have available for us. The African descendants across the board do not have that benefit. So for me, it's more economic than it is social interaction.
It is more economic than it is social interactions. Dr. David Hines, welcome. I know that you were on your program and that you would have taken time out perhaps to cut short the program to be here. And we want to say a special thank you for joining us, albeit a bit late, but still here in the struggle. I see Mr. Burke is laughing. Of course, the introduction that we place before our viewers is as Guyana descended into an apartheid state, and of course we define apartheid as a policy or system of segregation or discrimination on the grounds of race. And of course, there will be characteristics that we will deal with. But I was making the point, Dr. Hines, before Apostle Nigel London would have come in, that those South Africa's apartheid were, laws were instituted, for these, there were acts and so on, to cause segregation, to make it legal and so on. In Guyana, we don't have those acts and those legislations, but the actual manifestation of what has been happening what had happened in South Africa in terms of segregation and racism, those things are happening in Guyana. And that's where we are. Apostle Nigel London, continue.
Thank you so much. And we are seeing it because I'm happy that you were very specific in noting that there are no laws and there's no ascension to the books to say, well, this is now legal for this to happen. But when we examine how Guyanese are treated, I'm sure we get into that discussion further. I pay attention to what is now the zeitgeist in this nation, the whole spirit behind it, what's happening.
Yes.
And what we see is that there is a distinct discrimination between Afro-Guyanese and those of Indian descent. And I'm careful to note that those who are supporters of the PPP civic, because they may be of Indian descent, and if they do not support the PPP civic, then they are treated as if they are African Guyanese, but of course with less hostility in many instances. But when we look at, for example, aggregates, sandstone, and so on, we cannot name on this broadcast along the Linen Highway 3 African Guyanese, even 2, who have leases or titles or the right to have sandpit operation. I know of only 1. What explanation can Irfan Ali give or Jagyo give to anyone to say that is not a form of apartheid, which I say specifically speaks to how you treat us economically?
Precisely. And we will elaborate a bit more on that. Rickford Burke, president of CGID, a well-known activist in the United States, has been working tirelessly in this struggle to see the liberation of Guyanese, all Guyanese, but primarily African Guyanese, whom I would like to say and use the term, who are in bondage in Guyana today. Rickford Burke, the same question to you. Have we descended into an apartheid state?
Absolutely. I think the Guyanese government is ruled by an apartheid regime. The PPP government, I see apartheid more broadly than the way you discussed. I think apartheid not only has to do with segregation, but it has to do with subjugation and marginalization of a people. And it has also to do with a small group of people, a cabal, ruling and bringing the majority of the people under subjugation. That's exactly what happened in South Africa. And the basis of it is racism. One race holding itself supreme or superior over the other, and then using their perceived racial superiority to bring others under subjugation. And when you examine apartheid policy, the structure of the government, everything is replicated in Guyana. So the PPP government is an apartheid government. They have brought African Guyanese under subjugation. They use the police force to enforce that subjugation, like the racist South African government did. They're conducting economic genocide where they're marginalizing Afro-Guyanese from the economy. Indo-Guyanese are getting all the contracts, or Indo-Guyanese that support the PUP are getting all the contracts. They're the ones that have prestigious government jobs. They're the ones that make all the decisions in the public service, even though the public service, the majority of the public servants are Afro-Guyanese. The cabal is controlling, make the decisions and the policies for the public service and the state. One important fact here is, even though Guyanese structurally in society are not segregated, we actually are segregated. We don't live together. I mean, now it's changing, but you have Indian villages, Indian towns, and so on. And the government is taking advantage of that. They are using the resources of the country, particularly oil wealth, to enhance and empower their own segregated communities. Maybe soon we will see blacks aren't allowed here somewhere in the city, or APNU supporters or PNC supporters are not allowed here. I think that is coming. And it might not manifest itself in the way I'm seeing it now, but look at what is happening in the economy. Afro-Guyanese are bidding for contracts and they're not getting any. So to me, a sign is on the door of the National Tender Board: blacks are not welcome. That's how I see it. That's how it's manifesting itself. We have a situation where, even with regard to fiscal policy or banking policy, you and somebody that look like you, myself, Dr. Hines, or Mr. London, Reverend London, might walk into a bank and the rules suddenly change for us to get a loan. But Mr. Singh or Mr. Kisoon or somebody can get a loan, at the click of a finger. And the government doesn't see that that's a problem. In terms of marginalization, let's look at our communities. Buxton, Hopetown, Number 5, then Amstel, Linden. The government is starving those communities of fund. All of the Guyanese, whether you're African Guyanese, Chinese, Asian, East Indian, Amerindian, they're paying taxes. And the resources of the country belong to every Guyanese. But the government is using the resources of the state only for the benefit of their Indian supporters, and throw some crumbs at the table, under the table, for black people, as though we're dogs. And I had a discussion with a group of young people here, and I draw attention to what's happened in Sudan. I just wrote an article that will be published tomorrow about it. Sudan was one country, and it was separated, divided into two, because of subjugation and marginalization on ethnic grounds. And to me, that's where the country is heading. The PPP wants to divide our country on the basis of ethnic grounds. They think that they're superior. To me, they're the new white slave owners. They're the new plantocracy. They believe that everybody else is living on the PPP's plantation, Guyana. And so they must marginalize us and subjugate us and subject us to the treatment like slaves received under colonialists. Look what they did in Maka. That is the most single replication of what our slaves went through. Look what they did to the people of Maka. Dragged them through the mud, beat them, broke down their homes. It was only left for them to ride around with horses like slave owners and whip those people to get them off of their own ancestral land. So yes, we have an apartheid government in Guyana, and we have to mobilize the international community like the South Africans did to defeat this apartheid government.
Thank you very much. Dr. David Hines, the same question will be posed to you. Is Guyana now an apartheid state?
Good evening to you, Brother Norman. I haven't been on with you now for almost 2 years. And good evening to my brothers who I see very often because they come on to my program. And I'm very glad that you've taken up this subject. I'm sorry for being late, when you are running all over the place, there's so few of us to do so much that sometimes we overlap, but I'm glad that I'm here. I would say the easiest test of whether we have descended into an apartheid state is the way the government is responding to the charge. You know, if the government felt we weren't an apartheid state, they would just laugh it off and say, my goodness, come on now, as the British will say, come on now, what are you talking about? But instead, their first response was to close down the conference. The second response was to threaten to jail us if we went ahead with the conference. And since then, every time that word comes up, they are screaming and squealing all over the place. So, Interbeniba Mekwashiba, take notice, right? There must be something that that word brings out from the oppressor. And I think that's a good test of whether we are. But yes, the answer to your question is yes. And I am part of Coffee 250, which not coined the term, but used the term to describe our present dispensation. And we did not use the term lightly. We took some time, we deliberated, because we are people who are human beings, and we used our capacity to examine the meaning of the word and how it relates to Guyana. I love that definition that you use there. You know, apartheid is not synonymous with South Africa. There was apartheid in the United States from the Middle Passage right through to 1960, and some people argue it's still here. They may not be de jure, meaning by law. What makes South Africa and American apartheid significant is that they were instituted in the laws.
Law, yes, yes.
That is what made them think. But in practice, apartheid has been practiced in the Caribbean. Colonialism was about apartheid. The colonial state was an apartheid state. We lived apart. I mean, you and brother London lives in Linden. The white people worked up the Gaiba, where before it was Gaiba, it was Ember. Who worked at them? They lived in their own quarters away from the black, even when they were black engineers and so on. They didn't live where the white people live. There was physical apartness, if that's what they're looking for, you know. So yes, we have apartheid in Guyana, and we have to have apartheid in Guyana because we have wealth as we never did before. And the competition for the wealth means that all the ethnic groups in the country will line themselves up to get a part of the wealth. If we construct systems and institutions to encourage the equitable distribution of wealth, then we would not have to deal with the charges of apartheid. If we then take from the winner-take-all system, the winner-take-all majoritarian system, is that what we have done to that is that we have used that system. We have manipulated that system into creating an apartheid state. And so if you want to see apartheid in Guyana, look at the policies.
Yes.
My brothers, they enumerated the policies, so I'm not going to go them over. All right? You have a worldview. Your worldview begins that God created us equal, but some are more equal than some. You know, it used to be that God created us unequally, right? So I don't think anybody in these enlightened days were going to say that. So they will say God created us equal, but some are more equal than some. Some people don't lay down their bucket where they are and accept their second-class citizenship. Some people don't ban their belly. Some people like to party. So some groups have behavioral patterns that renders them inferior. And some groups have behavioral pattern that renders them superior. And if you start off with that worldview, And your policies are going to reflect that. If you believe people of Linden are not capable of doing agriculture, then you are not going to spend money on agriculture in Linden. You need to do was to mine bauxite. Bauxite is now gone, and they're good for nothing else. So all you do is you go into Linden and you give them some handouts. When that's done, we'll come back and give you some more next month, and so on. So that you are not investing in the productivity of the people at Linden. Your policies show that those people are not capable of production and productivity. And so, therefore, your policy of handouts to them, your policy of going to them and making them look like they're what Rudyard Kipling taught, half people and half human and half animals. Then you behave in a certain way to them, and you go into another community in which you convince that those people's behavior puts them squarely in the bracket of humanity. Then you treat them as human. You invest in them. You assume that they will want to see international sports. So you build a big stadium, but you go to Boston. They're not capable of hosting international sport. They're bad behave. They will burn the roads. We're not going to put a stadium here so that when people come from overseas, they embarrass us. We're going to give them a little ball ground. But we're going to take the stadium to a place where human beings who got manners and know how to behave. So, in terms of its policies, we have separate policies. 1896, especially versus Ferguson said separate but equal. And then they changed their mind in 1898 and said separate and unequal. And so what we have in Guyana is separate and unequal.
And that is what apartheid really is. The other term for apartheid is separate development.
Yes.
Is separate development. I want our people to understand, the Guyanese people to understand. But as we go forward into the program, we will have to discuss what must be done. We'll have to discuss what must be done. Dr. Hines, you have spoken extensively publicly about the budget. And I want to ask Rickford Burke and Nigel London and yourself, how, when you look at the budget of the 2023 budget, when you look at that budget and you look at it in the context of whether apartheid exists in Guyana, how is that budget linked to that? How is that budget, show us that even in that sort of policy decision that apartheid is being practiced? I will go to Rickford first briefly, and Apostle Nigel London also, and straight to Dr. David Hines.
Well, the government's apartheid policies is actually almost codified in the budget. The budget cut funding for large communities that the government does not control. Georgetown, Region 4, Linden. It was pointed out by Ganesh Mahipal, who's the shadow minister for local government. You have, for instance, the government setting up a hospitality university or training institute in Port Moran for the benefit of the separate but more supreme people, like Dr. Hines said, in Port Moran, the East Indian supporters. Now you tell me, most of the hospitality in the country is in Georgetown. Almost all of the hotels are based in Georgetown. You have some resorts in some remote locations that cater for ecotourism. But the government is building all of these hotels in Georgetown, but they're training people in Port Moran. The same thing they're doing with Gaisuko. They're pouring billions upon hundreds of billions of dollars into Gaisuko, a dying industry. When you could create industrial complexes in Linden and other depressed communities. Any government that is a responsible government that want to make sure that there's equal development, and as we say now, equal or equitable growth, um, would invest heavily in depressed communities like Linden, economically depressed communities. But this government is not doing that. The government is Crane. They're setting up gas to shore at Crane on the East Bank, which is on the East Bank, which is a part of the PPP constituency. They're setting up shore bases at Vreeden Hoop and Crane and all these places. The government is moving ahead only to develop East Indian communities. Now, let's see if the government has put any project, development project, in any black community that you could find. Can anybody name any? I can't name any. Look at who they're giving all of the contracts to. They're giving their supporters billions of dollars in contract. These people have no experience. They don't even have a company to execute these contracts. They then have to turn around and hire people, hire engineers, hire contractors. But they want to transfer the wealth of the country to their people. And if you listen to the budget debate, you will hear the opposition members of parliament, even the Auditor General, pointing out that these contractors don't have the capacity to honor the contracts. Look how many road projects are stalled. So many projects are stalled because the contractors that the government is giving these contracts to can't execute these contracts. So when you look at the government's program, I have not heard anything that any plans the government have for Buxton, for Denamstel, for Linden. Linden is an important town. We have the bauxite industry there. If you want to me, it's more economically feasible to revive bauxite than sugar. Sugar is dead. Sugar is dead. Our sugar industry is based on labor. They don't want to use mechanical harvesters and modernize the sugar industry because they want their supporters to be employed. And so the industry is suffering because whereas the rest of the world probably pays $20 to produce a ton of sugar, Guyana is paying $500. How can the industry be viable? It cannot. But the government is pouring money into the industry because they want their supporters to be employed and to get money. So all in all, what I see with this budget is a way for the government to transfer the wealth of the country to their ethnic supporters while they continue to drive black people into impoverishment. And one of the main aspects of apartheid is racial, political, and
economic,
social segregation,
yeah,
and economic
discrimination.
segregation,
Yes,
and discrimination,
yes.
and discrimination. So the government can't argue that it's not an apartheid government, because if you look at the government statistics, it proves that they're discriminating. If you look at their contracts, it proves that they're discrimination. If you look at where they're developing, it proves discrimination. And so I think we as a country have to come to realization whether or not this government wants the black community to develop along with the rest of the country, or if they're intentionally leaving the black community behind. And if we come to the conclusion that they're the government and they're leaving the black community behind, there are two things we must do. One, we have to find a way to vote them out of office, or two, we have to determine whether or not this government wants to live in harmony with black people. I don't think they do. And if we look at Sudan, we can see where Sudan ended up. It ended up in two countries. The country was split in half. And I think that's where the PP wants to take Guyana. I could be wrong, but I'm positive that with such discrimination, we will end up in civil war. No part of the world, a subjugated people will continue to remain subjugated for the rest of their life. Even the children of Israel fought back against people who wanted to enslave them. What about us now in this modern era? Something has to be done, and it has to be initiated by Guyanese at home and then followed up by the international community. We cannot allow these racists in the PPP to drive black people out of Guyana and drive us into subjugation. Unacceptable.
Unacceptable. We will not allow them, we must not allow them to drive us into subjugation. Apostle Nigel London, in addition to the same question, I noticed today that the Minister of Foreign Affairs was at Linden. And the express purpose for being at Linden was to go through areas like Kansas City, where I'm originally from, of course, and look at what development Kansas City needs, infrastructural and otherwise. This is the Minister of Foreign Affairs. Sometimes you wouldn't believe that. And they brought out so many people out there, majority black people. They've got them standing there, and the minister is going to take them on a walk through the community to look at what needs to be done in the community, what sort of development. And Apostle London, going to the original question, when you look at the budget, and to what Brother Barker said, your thoughts?
Thank you. I paid careful attention to strategy and the manner in which any apartheid regime would strategize. Because there is no way in this environment, the international environment, that they can demonstrate with words that they do not intend to treat African descendants with any degree of equity and honor. What they have done was that they, on purpose, when you look at the budget, it's heavily weighted towards infrastructure development. Now that sounds healthy to many Guyanese people. But what Guyanese, for the greater part, are not paying attention to, and I hope the more would, is the fact that they strategized to ensure that their supporters were prepared for what will come in the budget. So this budget that was read has got hundreds of billions of dollars that will be spent in the area where the PB supporters would benefit almost 100%, and that's infrastructure development. So when Todd goes to Linden, for example, and he speaks to what development can be, infrastructure development can be had in Kansas City, he knows that as long as it exceeds $40 million, it's out of the hand of the RDC. He knows, therefore, that the Ministry of Works will be responsible for construction.
Wow.
And then what happens is, no Lindoner on average will get a $20 or $30 or $40 million contract to do any development in Linden. So he knows that. And Utah doesn't have any power to determine anything that's different. So they've already strategized that in the industry, that in construction and infrastructure development, their supporters and their cronies and lackeys are already in absolute power. The only hope that the African descendants have in reference to this environment is that one of their PPP supporters would want 3 or 4 other contracts. So you tell the Africans, well, listen, go ahead, and I'll back you. But the arrangement would be that you get $2 million and we receive 200, or you get $3 million and we receive 300. So this budget points to that. There cannot be an argument leveled that there is an economic agenda afoot for descendants of Africans to benefit or to grow and to thrive or to catch up. So if you look at it further, you will see that there is a legitimate argument on paper that says that many African descendants who apply for or tend for contracts cannot have it, they're not qualified for it, and that's the truth, because they do not have what's required. Let's not forget that Granger put something in place where he said you have to have, I think, about 30% of whatever it is you're going to bid for the nonsense, which crippled 100% of African descendants in this country from having any access to the country. But they are now levying and leveraging that because it works perfectly in their favor. So they know that if one like you or me or Mr. Burke or Dr. Hines would level an argument and say that, listen, you've got Africans who don't have contracts. They'll say, well, they're free to bid for it, but they can't qualify because they know. If, for example, and I will rest with this, if a road has to be constructed, the road work is, let's say, 2 miles. They know, Mr. Brown, that when they begin to assess your bid and they see that Norman Brown, who's of African descent, has 1 truck, Harry Singh has 65 trucks in his fleet. This work, if you give it to Mr. Brown, will take 4 years. If you give it to Harry Singh, it will take 2 months. Who will they give the contract to? Obviously, Harry Singh. They haven't discriminated against you in the context that they say you cannot bid at all. They simply, by strategy, eliminated the possibility of ever having a contract. That's what this budget speaks to. This budget has been so tailored that development would be had, that millions upon billions of dollars would be spent, but who shall benefit the most? That's what this budget is about.
Who shall benefit the most? Apostle Nigel London there. Dr. David Hines, this budget, and the same question is directed at you. But I know that the PB called the budget, what, transformative or transformational? What did they call it? Transformational. I want you to elaborate a bit on that budget in the context of the discourse here. But let our viewers, and we have quite a lot of viewers who have tuned in tonight, let them know what is at play.
Yeah, thanks for that question. And I want to associate myself with the remarks of my two comrades here.
Yes.
Because a budget is about the single most important document that can come out of a government. Because it's about how much you're going to spend and how much you expect to come in to the government, and where you expect the revenue to come from. Now, why do we spend? We spend so that we can create the things that human beings need. Governments spend money in order to create things that uplift the welfare of the people. And one of the routes towards the welfare of the people is their ability to earn. Now, we are not a private sector grounded country in which the private sector operates autonomous from the state and all those kinds of things. The private sector is dependent on the state for business. And so therefore, when the state spends, we have to look at how and where the state is spending. The old political science definition, who gets what, when, and how. Now, our workforce, because of the way in which our history developed, is compartmentalized based on race, right? So that we know Indians have eventually they began to dominate the agriculture. I say eventually because prior to them coming, there was Africans who dominated agriculture, including rice cultivation, right? That Africans gravitated towards the professions and the public service, the armed forces, things like teaching. We got into mining, small-scale mining, and so forth. Chinese and Portuguese were grandfathered in, were affirmative actioned in to the private sector. And one could argue that when indentureship was over, that Indians themselves were given land, which in a place like Guyana, an agricultural economy like us, land is king, you see? And so therefore, in a sense, they were affirmative action into the private sector. And Africans were driven out of a need to make a living after they were pushed out of agriculture and pushed out of the private sector, they ended up in the thing. So historically, it means that our workforce is compartmentalized. If you're a government in 2020 that is committed towards righting the wrongs of the past and to bring about some kind of equity in terms of who has access to what, one of the first things you want to do is before you open up for opportunities, you look at condition. Is there equality of condition? If you say that the private sector is going to be the engine of the growth, fair enough. I don't agree with it. But let's say you're going down that road because that's what the neoliberals tell you, right? You have to look around your society and look at who are in the private sector, who dominates the private sector. And you have to ask yourself whether there's going to be equitable distribution of wealth, equitable distribution of resources, if the conditions are not equal. If one of your major ethnic groups is not represented in the private sector in the same way as others, then your development is a non-starter. Because what you are going to do doing is that you are going to develop a further inequitable society. And when you multiply the inequities in the society, you then broaden the gap between the rich and the poor. Now, in Guyana, when we talk about rich and poor, we're not talking just simply about social class. We have to talk about race. And we ask ourselves, when we look at the top echelons of the society who are going to benefit a lot from private sector-driven economy, what do we see? We see, as Nigel Hughes has pointed out, we see almost a 90 to 10% gap in terms of who potentially are able to get resources. Now, this is not a today thing, and that is why I'm talking about institutions. When the economy started to collapse in the 80s as a result of the world economic situation, it was African women mainly who took suitcases, went to the islands and further afield, and who fed Guyana, clothed Guyana, and kept the Guyana economy going. When we were forced to get into structural adjustment, the IMF told us we have to open the economy to big business. There was not a policy to bring the traders, as we call them then, into mainstream, that is, equip them to become entrepreneurs. And we had a policy, all right, whereby the traders would expand from being small traders, all right, into business people. If we had done that policy in the 80s under oil, we would have had a different story. But our hands were tied because he's been dictated to IMF and the World Bank, who's not talking about small business, becoming big business. He's talking about opening up to big business from outside and big business from inside. And we missed the boat in the early 1990s to create a new Black entrepreneurial class. Right? Now, we have money now, all right? Because when you have money, you have leverage, you have more elbow space, right? Is there a policy to turn those small business people that you go into any village, you go to Linden, my God, you go to Linden Market, look at the small businesses there, right? You go in any village, go to Golden Grove roadside right now. You see them there, small business, small. Is there a policy to turn those small businesses into thriving big businesses? Because in so doing, you are what? You're improving their condition to bring them up to their East Indian and Chinese and Portuguese brothers and sisters who are doing business. You're bringing them to an equality of condition. The budget does not do that. The budget does not steer resources to small business people. The budget is steering almost 40% of that budget goes to big infrastructure. And the big infrastructure will go to, as my brothers have said, the big contractors. And the big contractors are of a particular ethnic group. What you're doing intentionally is that you are creating ethno-racial advantages in the society. The state is in the business of doing that, of creating ethno-racial advantages. And so you're creating different classes of people. Let me end with this, Brother Norman. We hear people say all the time, look, they have Indian poor people. And I do agree they have Indian poor people. And they have black poor people and they have Amerindian poor people. But their conditions are different. The Indian poor is likely to get more crumbs from the table because the Indian rich is more likely to let some crumbs come down to the Indian poor. And the government is likely to give more crumbs to the Indian poor than to the Amerindian poor. Now, if you're a poor Indian, you're not competing with a rich Indian. You're not competing with a rich black person. You're not competing with a Portuguese rich person. You're competing with poor black people and poor Amerindian people. And in your competition with them, you are given an advantage by the trickle down from your Indian private sector and the trickle down from the state. You are given some advantage. It's not privilege, but it's an advantage. All right? And so, therefore, you are in a better position to withstand the shocks of neoliberalism, to withstand the shocks of the giveaway to the Indian sector. Now, let's move to culture, right? We know through Indian religion, and there's a sense of communalism that comes through the religion. And so one assumes, in that sense, that the Indian rich is going to look differently on the Indian poor when he looks at the black poor or the Amerindian poor. Because they, according to their cultural teachings, they are outside. They are beneath. If we go to the caste system, they are beneath. They are the other. So you may be a poor Indian. You may be a poor Portuguese, but you're not the other. The poor black, the poor Amerindian is the other. And I think that is something we miss when we talk about the poor Indians. Having poor Indians does not deny Indian wealth. Having poor Indians don't mean that the heart of the wealth is in Indian people's hands. So that race operates within our class system. Our class system itself is riddled with racial prejudices. And let's say one last thing. Look at what happened. Look at what happened in Buxton. You create some Bantus in Buxton. And those who understand apartheid know what I mean by the
Yes.
Right? You create some Abel Mazurias and so on in Buxton. All right? And you say, I am going to give you some privilege. But the privilege is over your fellow Buxtonians. When it comes to privilege in comparison with other Bantus in the Indian community, you are not equal. Kanu is not going to chase down some Indian Bantus as the way they chase down African Bantus in Buxton. So even at that level, even at that bastardized level in which you are manipulating people, there is not an equal playing field. Look at Todd. Todd ought to be looking after our foreign affairs. He ought to be looking after our territorial integrity. He ought to be looking after what's happening. But here he is, being sent like a little schoolboy. Well, a schoolboy is a good thing. Being sent like a little short-tailed boy into Kansas City to go there and this thing, his brothers and sisters. What a shame. And what is ridiculous is that Brother Todd doesn't understand that he is foreign minister in name only, but in practice he's a water boy to go into his black communities and try to throw dust into the eyes of his fellow brother. Shame on you, brother Todd.
Shame on Brother Todd. Dr. David Hines there, on Voice of the Diaspora, Apostle Nigel London, and of course Mr. Rickford Burke. I want to, because when we looked at when we look, sorry, at apartheid in South Africa, and it's, you talked about the Bantu and so on. When we look at they had what you call the Indemnity Act of 1961 that made it legal for police officers to commit acts of violence, to torture, and to kill, in the process of their official duties. That was put into law. In Guyana, we see the same thing happened and still happening. Apostle Nigel London, we're still on the subject of apartheid, and we're looking at the social aspect, and we just spoke about the economic aspect of it, and so on. When this was apartheid in South Africa, where the government was allowed through law to have the police kill, torture, at their whims. In Guyana, there is no law, but that is rabid when we look at that situation there. And I think that in itself is an aspect of apartheid that we need to elaborate a bit on, because that's an aspect of apartheid that drives fear into our people, not to resist, not to rebel. And in my question in relation to what must be done, we will examine that. But what do you have to say about that, Apostle Nigel? Then we go to Rickford Burke to respond to it.
Thank you. The apartheid has no power, neither can it ever be successful in the absence of fear. Fear of the state or of the administration has to be, or of the opposite race who has control over certain arms of the state, has to be the engine by which apartheid moves and the fuel for that engine. And so what we see happening in Guyana is that in the absence of what is coded into law, we see the manifestations of what we're using so often this evening. We're seeing an exhibition of it in the absence of law. And when persons seek to rise to say, but this is unlawful, this shouldn't happen, a police officer should not do this, there is no arm of law that says, correct, we shall therefore bring this police officer into account. And we shall bring whoever instructed that officer to do whatever they did into account. And I recollect from what happened and the protest that happened in the East Coast with Monroe Pope for Quindon Bacchus, where police officers were live. They saw phones, they saw they were on camera. They saw persons were recording, and they were saying to individuals, get off the effing road, not that terminology, and pulling the trigger, shooting at people. They shot the Static News reporter, her son, in the eye. It hit him. And to this day, no officer has been charged. Because although the act is unlawful, there is no arm of law to protect the citizens. And that is another manifestation of apartheid, where in the absence of law, there is no arm that says, now what it is unlawful, I we shall hold you to account. And that is what will drive fear into the average Guyanese to say, well, I would not react to this, because should I do so, there is no court, or there are very few magistrates, or even a judge, who will take the risk to oppose the arms who they know would be behind these actions. What we have in Guyana, therefore, is not a law that allows officers to wantonly and recklessly harass and even injure, and to further extent kill Guyanese who oppose the administration. What we have are officers who are handpicked to drive fear in the population and making examples of many people. And they know that they're protected by their superiors and by ministers in government. I have the experience of that.
They may
We grab people publicly.
there may not be any law, but there seem to be an unspoken rule
There
that
is an
this,
unspoken rule of protection
yes.
for those who perpetrate these acts.
Rickford Burke.
I support everything Apostle Nigel just said. He mentioned the Starbuck News report on our son that was shot. Come back to Buxton. Dr. Hines mentioned Buxton, and we know that the people who the Kanu ranks were chasing are the people in Buxton who the government supports. This government supports criminals on the world whenever it suits them, so as to try to bring others in their community under control. And that's why we haven't heard anything else about that Kanu case. But in the meantime, Kanu ranks shot into the homes of ordinary residents in Buxton. The government has not apologized. Kanu has not apologized. They haven't compensated those people. And as Apostle Nigel said, every time the PUP comes to power, they want the population to be intimidated by the police. They handpick police officers like Clifton Hickey and Wendell Blanham, who was removed from his conduct under the Hoyt administration, put them back in there in the leadership of the Guyana Police Force. That is to intimidate people. Hickens and his troops are sent out there to shoot down and kill black people who protest against the government. And at CID, they frame you. I mean, exactly what happened to apartheid. If you are known as it even happened in America in the 60s during the civil rights era. If you're known as someone who opposing the government, all of a sudden you go to work one day and the police come and pick up and say, "Hey, you raped 3 girls 2 nights ago, and you're jailed for 40 years or 50 years. That's what the government is doing in Guyana. Look what they're trying to do to me. I don't even live in the country. But they're getting people to say things so as to frame me. And then they have the audacity, because they have oil money, to attack the Attorney General of New York. They feel so empowered and powerful that they went to the Republicans and say, "Here, look, this lady's associated with Rickford Burke," right? And they assisted the Republican campaign to a point where the FBI is now investigating it. So these people think that they're powerful, and they use law enforcement to enforce their apartheid policies. And they know that these policies will eventually create an upheaval, a social upheaval. They know that they're oppressing people. They know that unoppressed people will someday rise up. And that's why in a national security analysis that that was submitted to the government, they said that, oh, well, because of division and lack of unity in the black and opposition community, they know they can't win an election, so they will loot and burn and do all of these things to the state. They know that. That is a pretext, and they will cause division in the military because they can't get power. Well, you know what? It is the government is causing division in the army, because they have skipped 2 colonels, and they're now planning to appoint, when the current chief of staff retires later this year, appoint Colonel Omar Khan as the chief of staff, allegedly above 2 other colonels. It is the police injustice, abuses, and excesses that is stirring up social unrest. It is the discriminatory policies of the government that is causing despair and hopelessness in the community. And that's why people will rebel. Look what happened on the Jack Day. Hundreds of young black men were killed with impunity. I am surprised. I'm telling you, when you look at what happens in Belgium and France and in the United States and in the United Kingdom, when what these types of atrocities trigger, massive unrest, I'm surprised that we've not had a civil war in Guyana as a result of Jadeo and the Roger Can death squad policies of eliminating people who are opposed to the government under this rubric of them being criminals. And now they're backing power. They're employing these same tactics against people. The international community is looking. So they can't form death squads. So they've converted the Guyana police force into the modern death squad. When Clifton Hicken was the commanding officer in the Linden Division, you had 3 protesters who were protesting an increase, what they saw as an unjust increase in electricity tariffs. They were shot and killed by police. No one was held accountable. No one was held accountable for the killing of hundreds of young black people. No one was held accountable for the shooting of the Static News reporter. No one has been held accountable for the shooting into the homes of Bostonians. Whenever police commits atrocities under the PPP regime, they are happy, they encourage it. It's not investigated, no one is punished. Why? Because they want the population to be intimidated by the police. And they're creating a situation where they will incite violence against the police. You remember a time under the Jack Day regime, police officers were scared when they were off duty to walk around in their uniform because people would attack them because the police was seen as the enemy of the people, the instrument through which the PPP enforced their racist policies and discriminatory policies is happening again. And we have to, as I said before, we are at a point now where we have to say what needs to be done to change this. This information is not coming out of Guyana because they control the media. There's this ethnic hegemony in Guyana that on the one hand marginalized black people, including members of the media. And then you have the media suppressing that kind of information from coming out. And then you have ABC ambassadors who are only vigilant when the East Indians are in opposition. The ABC ambassadors come from a country where they themselves were imperialists and mistreated black people. So I'm wondering if they're quiet because it's black people who are being mistreated now by the new so-called plantocracy. And so we have to tell the international community ourselves. That's why programs like this one is important. That's why we are such strong advocates in the United States to our legislators, to national legislators, to members of Congress, members of the Senate, the administration. I understand that the U.S. government is now planning a conference on Guyana's future, to discuss these same atrocities. I'm not sure that they're getting the right reports from the embassy in Guyana. They probably can't. Not when the ambassador is standing up saying, yeah, we won, democracy was challenged and we won. You believe that she's the Minister of Foreign Affairs or something in the Jack Wali cabinet. So we have to now come up with a strategy, just like the blacks in South Africa did, to alert the world about what is happening in Guyana. And the people in Guyana must stand up and resist this apartheid regime. They have this strategy now where those of us who are talking about their racism, they call us racist. So it's against the law to talk about PPP racism. It's either unlawful or you're a racist. I don't care what they call me. I know that black people in Guyana will not be subjugated. They will not drive us into. We do not live on their plantation. We live in a country that we belong to, where our foreparents built. The slaves built Guyana. The Indians from India, who are the PPP support base, came and met us in Guyana. We own Guyana just like them. And they're not going to drive us out of Guyana. If they want, they can take an island and go live there by themselves if they don't want to live in peace and harmony with us. But we will not be subjugated. Guyana will not become a PPP colony. We will resist it. We have to live in peace. We have to develop Guyana together. We have to encourage inclusive governance and inclusive growth so that everybody can benefit from Guyana, not only the Indians or the PPP Indians. And we must remember that there are Indians who don't support the PPP, who are also under subjugation, Amerindians who are under subjugation. So when we speak, we don't only speak for black people, even though the majority and the target of this apartheid policies is towards black people, but they're also marginalizing Indians and Amerindians who don't support them. So when we speak on behalf of all of those people. But I am saying today that as long as I have breath, I will fight to make sure that black people are not enslaved in Guyana by this neo-fascist cabal, by Jack Day and Anil Nanlal and Irfan Ali, who think that they're the new plantocracy, the new white slave owners that want to subjugate never, should never allow it to happen. And the people in Guyana must overcome this fear and intimidation by the police and stand up for their rights.
And they must overcome that fear and intimidation by the police and stand up for their rights. Rick Fredberg, the president of CGID, here on Voice of the Diaspora. Dr. Hines, it's kind of funny because, we're having a nice, relaxed conversation, though, it's quite serious. I think we are all, not that we're tired, but we want the world to know that we can sit down and have an educated and intelligent conversation. They see us as rabble rousers and so on. Tonight we're sitting down. Apostle London is very focused. I'm very focused. Burke is very focused, and of course yourself. But this when we on this subject of apartheid, and I will let you, Dr. Hines, elaborate a bit on this part, and then we will go to what must be done, and then we will summarize and wrap up. But Dr. Hines, I don't know what is happening, because the Suppression and Communism Act of 1950 in South Africa was instituted to crush any opposition to government. Anyone that rose up to say anything, the police would have arrested them, would have killed them, would have done that. Here again, we're seeing where that law was instituted. In Guyana, it is, to me, and in my opinion, this is my opinion, it is worse than when something is put into law. Because now they can say, this is not happening. The international community could say, well, there's no law in this. You understand what I'm saying? And they are getting away with it. So they are killing people. They're intimidating people. They've gone into Mr. Boston's house, a black man, a businessman with not a single criminal record, in front of his wife in bed. They executed him. Nothing came out of that. A young lawyer, black lawyer from Linden, went to represent her client. And in the police station, or in the Conway quarters, I think it was, an Indian policeman.
Suku.
Edward, thank you very much, Mr. Burke. In that headquarters, an Indian policeman, officer, who is associated with the cabal, arrested her for doing her job. That's a lawyer doing her job. Nothing has come out of it. And this is where we see the extent of that suppression. It is more effective, and I want to drive home this point, it is more effective than if a law was put in place like in South Africa. Then you could have had the Mandelas, and the international community would have come down and to say, you know what, we will have embargoes, sanctions, and so on. That's not what is happening in Guyana. But the full force and manifestation of apartheid is existent even in this form. Dr. Hines.
Well, the Cybercrime Act and the Racial Hostility Act are doing the job of the apartheid law. They have manipulated the law and turned it into apartheid law. And I am so glad that you and Pastor London and especially Brother Rick Ford just now raised some very important points that I would like to deal with. And I would like to expand on Brother Burke's comments. There is a civil war going on in Guyana. It's a Cold War. A civil war is going on right now in Guyana. It's a Cold War. And we saw glimpses of it in Buxton. These are black friends of the PPP in conflict with PPP agents. And that could have spilled over into the village. And the PPP closed it down very quickly. Had that thing been allowed to go on for a day or two, it would have spilled over into the village. poor people are like advantage. All right? And they would have seen that the PPP were taking advantage. Nevertheless, those guys are their friends. Those guys are young black boys who the PPP are manipulating, and the village would have seen through that. And that thing could have expanded into something bigger. The same thing at Hope Town. All right? People's anger, they know that these rich people of another ethnic group throw their weight around. And they saw this car knock down two people from their village, and they instinctively react because they're human beings. No, we don't have to agree with an eye for an eye and a tooth for tooth. But you don't tell people who are frustrated that when that opportunity arises, as Bob Marley said, I walked out of town one day, and I saw Sheriff John Brown coming, and I shot him because freedom came my way. I shot him and say, what to be, let it be. That's the point where Guyanese, African Guyanese are at the moment. Let not our hearts be troubled. Let not our hearts be troubled. You had a gentleman on your program who lauded you as Jesus Christ at the beginning of the program.
We will talk about that before we close. We'll talk about that before we close. I was keeping that as a thing. But let us deal with this issue, and then we'll spend 5 minutes for all of us to comment on that. I promise you. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Dr. Hines.
I was watching. No. One of the things that Glendale revealed was that this person's column began to lose numbers, and it was attracting the people. Not Norman Brown, not Rickford Burke, not the pastor, not David Hines, not Aubrey Norton. None of us told black people to stop reading that guy. They did it on their own. On their own. And they removed that eyesore. Because the column had become an eyesore on the largest circulating paper in the country. On their own, in the quiet of their homes. Without me or you or us telling them, stop reading it. And they did the impossible. Many of us would say, when is Glenland going to move? And our people stopped reading that course and forced him out of the largest circulating. You're talking about civil war. That is civil war. All right? People in the quiet of their homes. And so I just wanted to expand on what Brother was saying. That there is a civil war going on. And we know not the hour. We cannot know the hour because it's difficult to predict human behavior. What flared up in Buxton? What flared up in Hope Town is going to expand in the coming months. Take that from me. Now, last night I was on a program and Brother Ravidev said that I am pushing Aubrey Norton towards confronting. Well, the first thing is that he understands that, or he accepts that I have some influence. Because I have to have influence to push Norton.
Anyway, yeah, precisely.
But I have to tell him, no, I'm not pushing Norton confrontation. Confrontation comes from the government. I was not at Linden licking down people's homes. I was not in Moko confronting the people of Moko and licking down their homes. I was not in front of the hospital licking down people's stand, and I was not there and telling policemen to kneel on the back of black women. I was not there when they were spitting in black women's faces. The confrontation, the origins of the confrontation is the government. They are doing a wonderful job at confrontation. What I am merely trying to do is to encourage and inspire our people to self-defense. Self-defense. And I don't have to tell people how to defend themselves. They were doing that long before. They're defending themselves economically. They're defending themselves politically. If those people have their way, they will close down your program. They will close down past the program.
Yes.
They will close down for program.
Politics 101, all of them.
We sell more newspapers when the night come than all the media
Put together, yeah.
So, brother Rickford, let not your heart be troubled about the media. We sell more newspapers than them every night. Starting with Kilaki Amsterdam in the morning, and then late at night with Brother Norman and Brother Mark and yourself, and in between the rest of us. We sell more newspapers. We influence more minds than them.
That's true.
There is a civil war going on.
That's true.
And we are helping to inspire. You see, after centuries of combating terrorism, combating apartheid, combating crushing of the human souls, our people have learned the art of fighting and surviving.
Yes.
Fight
yes.
and survive.
Yes.
Fight and survive. Survive and fight. We have mastered that art. Professor Netterford called it chaos in order and order in chaos.
A sort of oxymoron.
And sometimes those of us who are impatient don't understand it.
Yeah.
I went to a funeral. I was recent in Boston for a couple of weeks. And I went to a funeral on the day before I was leaving. And I took the opportunity to speak on humanity of Africans at the funeral. I was being very deliberate. And as I walk out, I usually would greet people. But on that day, I went from person to person at funeral. But I tried to get people standing in trees and forward. And every person or group of persons I went to was giving me advice of what to say on my program. I came back and I looked at, what you all call it, they give you the numbers where people watching from and so on. And I realized that the largest audience for my program comes from Boston, followed by Linden, followed by Georgetown, followed by Beavy, followed by the Quarantine, followed by the Amstel. I should have known that. After all, I'm from Boston. But you're doing national politics. But everybody's telling me. Yes, one man tell me, Dr. Haynes, you got to stop rope-a-doping now. And you got to start throwing the punches, right? And so on. And I went back, and those people in that village are tuned into our programs every night. We believe that they're not being politicized, they are being politicized. But they understand the art of fighting and surviving. Surviving and fighting.
But I'll let you continue. But I want to add to that because you saw me smiling for a bit, But just before you come in, Brother Burke. But I want to add to that because I'm telling you, Apostle Nigel London, yourself and Rickford Burke, you guys are more popular than Aubrey Norton in the diaspora. You are more admired and liked. And when you said Ravi Dev, and that's why I was laughing all the time, it's a serious program. When you said Ravi Dev that you were pushing Aubrey to confrontation, I laughed because you may have to go, where I courtyard is a cannon. You may have to stuff Aubrey in a cannon and shoot him up to the confrontation. When he lands, hold on. When he lands there in the car, he's gonna run away. But I had to get it. I had to.
No, but that's your man, man.
No, but I accept that. I have worked to see a strong black man get there, and then he got weak. But I can't be blamed for that. But let Dr. Hines finish. Yeah, but he has to be able.
I have to go to prepare for my program.
No, you need to give us a 5 minutes. Step off that pedestal of arrogance and so on, and to engage people properly.
I don't.
But finish your point, and then we go into.
I disagree with Brother Aubrey. I disagree with him on how he handled Moko, and I said so publicly. But part of my policy is not to attack him. That doesn't mean that those of you who are close to the PNC shouldn't do that. You all are PNC members and supporters and so forth. people or him the cold if you feel that he's not up to speed. That's not my job.
It's
My job is
objective
to-
criticism. It's not an
No,
attack. It's
no, I'm not saying that. But I'm saying, from my perspective, I'm trying to help to lift the brother.
And that's a good thing you're doing. That's a good thing. But I'm telling you, Dr. Hines, you may have to have a crane. That's what I'm saying. But let's go. Let's go. If you're going to lift him. But let's go.
But I'm saying.
Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
Brother Rickford is admired and loved by Guyanese people. Everywhere I go. So he must be storing something
Yes,
in
exactly.
the minds of people. And so I'm saying to Brother Rickford, let not your heart be troubled, my brother. All right? And the roll is called up yonder. They will be there. I like to remind the people that only 3 years ago, less than 3 years ago, those very people who appear not to be doing anything today were ready to defend their votes.
Yes.
Were ready. Their leaders held them back. When the people of West Bobis, after the election, after those two boys were ready to lead us to the promised land, the politicians called it off. It's not the people. I can tell you.
It is not the people. And this is. And this is where we go quickly because we're going to wrap up in about 10 minutes. We go quickly to what do you think is the solution? What are the solutions to this apartheid that is happening in Guyana? And I want us to be very brief, but be very succinct. But be very. But so I will begin with Rickford Burke, and then we go to Apostle Nigel London, then we go to Dr. Hines.
Well, first of all, I think we have to organize. One, we need a civil liberties entity in Guyana to protect the people's civil rights and human rights. We need a Black Lawyers Association. We need a Black Private Sector Commission. We need Black institutions to protect the rights of Black people. We need a form of, we're not a minority, so I don't think affirmative action is the right word, but we need action to affirm our rights. We need action and policies and laws to make sure that there's a level playing field. We need to enact laws to make sure that there's equity. Some of these things that we want the PP to do, they think that they can do it as a result of their either good heart or discretion, should be codified into laws. Maybe we should have a constitutional amendment to enforce or to list civil rights and list the people's rights and affirm rights. I think also we need a mechanism to alert the international community to hold the government accountable. For instance, this government is coming to the United States Exim Bank, Import-Export Bank, to get monies, to use US taxpayer dollar, my taxpayer dollar, to fund projects in Guyana that would benefit one side. I don't believe the United States government should give them that money. And we have made representations to the board of the US Exim Bank. We need action like that. We need the State Department to tell Guyanese, the constituents of the Biden administration, why they are not taking action in Guyana. That's why we are communicating with our elected officials. We need Guyanese in the diaspora to play their part. I mean, we're playing a large role here, just like we need Guyanese and Guyana to take action. I would like to see a Black consortium where all of the Black, or most of the, or large groups of Black entrepreneurs can pool their resources together to qualify for contracts like, as expressed by Pastor London, where they're not eligible because they don't have the equipment. They're not eligible because they're not qualified. Why they're not qualified? Because they don't have the capability to maybe qualify for these contracts. I would like to see them qualify for contracts. I would like to see us finding a way to force equitable governance. And when I say force, I don't mean by use of force. I'm saying to force this government through political action to engage in equitable government, to make sure that we have equal we have inclusive democracy. We have a situation where this government is telling us that I am not going to talk to the black leaders. We are not talking to the opposition that represent half the country. We're not fulfilling our constitutional responsibility, obligation to engage the opposition leader because we don't think that we're the government, and we should engage in what? Then get out of the government. Get out of the government. You have a responsibility to make sure that there's an inclusive democracy. It is not your discretion. It is an obligation under the Constitution. And we have to find a way to, whether it's through the courts or whether it's through political action. For instance, you have the government attacking the mayor of Georgetown. If I was the mayor of Georgetown, none of them can come back to town. You're not going to arrest me because I'm protecting my citizens and because I'm exercising my free speech, and you driving from Borbis or wherever you come from in your enclaves to come back into my town? No. So I would like to see those kinds of changes. I would like to see a civil society, the religious community, the bishops get involved in protecting people's rights. You can't have your parishioners going to church every day, battered and bruised by a racist apartheid government, and you as an institution, a powerful institution in society, you're silent. The church, civil society organization, the trade unions, all of these organizations and institutions in society need to wake up. We also have to hold the courts accountable. Courts are responsible not to themselves. The entire state is made up of the people. The most powerful entity of a state is the people. So we have judges who are making sure that the PUP agenda is carried out. No, we have to hold them accountable as well. And how you hold them accountable? Because you hold the executive branch that appoints those judges, you hold them accountable. So in all, what I'm saying is that we need accountability. We need a mechanism to make sure that we have social change. We need a mechanism to hold this government accountable. We need a mechanism to make sure that this government fulfills its obligations under the Constitution. And we need to inform the international community that if this government cannot fulfill its responsibilities, its democratic responsibilities, they must be isolated, like Russia or whatever it is. We can't have the United States that talks about democracy in other countries ignoring democratic abuses by this apartheid regime. It cannot happen, and we will continue to fight here in the diaspora to make sure that we have equitable governance, fight to maintain democracy or re-establish democracy in this case, and fight to make sure neo-fascists like Barjadew and others in the cabal of the government don't succeed in making Guyana an ethnic dynasty. And like I said before, black people, ancestors, slaves built Guyana. The indentured servants came and met slaves in Guyana, toiling and building the country. Slaves bought Buxton and Mucka, and all of those lands that the PPP consider now to be prime real estate and want to drive black people out of it. It is the slaves that bought and owned those lands, and we must keep it. We must protect it. We must protect our people. And I am not only for black people. I want to make sure that all Guyanese can live in peace and harmony, and all Guyanese are treated fairly, that we have an inclusive democracy, that we have equitable governance. But at this point in time, we don't have that, and the people most marginalized are black people, and that's why we have to fight to protect their interests and their rights.
President of CGID, Mr. Rickford Burke, there, very powerful, very powerful. You spent a while there, don't run away. This program hereby notes that in terms of religious leaders standing in the struggle, Apostle Nigel London stands out. And yes, I believe he's the only religious leader, that is making history, and that has to be remembered, that the Apostle Nigel London is the only religious leader that is profoundly walking the walk. Apostle Nigel London, your take on what has to be done, the solutions, and then Dr. Hines, and then we'll have a little discourse on Freddie. Then we go. Yeah, go ahead.
What a way to end. I'm grateful for your compliments and.
But I mean that. I mean that. Yes.
I'm certainly grateful. It's not the first time I've heard it either, and although it's encouraging, it is at the same time painful to know that those who claim to be responsible for the souls of others do not understand the value of doing just that. In reference to what should be done, I believe that Guyana has got to dive deeper, and those of us who are willing to do so, into educating the public about the potency of social media. We are not living in 40, 50 years ago, whereby you could only act by being physically present anywhere. Today, this generation responds better and functions better in a private environment with a phone in their hand or a device in their hand. They are dangerous. And the PPP understands that clearly, which is what they dread the most. Those of us who are on social media and have the power, like I and others would do, to simply hold a telephone in your hand and video, record, and more so go live to say this was happening in my community. And that's what this person is saying to me. And this is what I'm experiencing. They dread it because they cannot arrest what is published. They can arrest the publisher, but it's already out there. And we must seek to understand that diversity and the change that has come upon us. And I understand that there is also in our nation a great need for the Constitution to change in one main area. I'm firmly of the view that 65 members of Parliament must all be elected by the people, not selected by head of a list. Every person who puts one foot in the House of Assembly must have been elected by people in their community, and that makes Guyana different. The reason we have this tribal nonsense in our system is because the PNC and the PPP are no different from each other in reference to what they stand for. And I know this may spiral us into a dangerous place, but they both understand the potency of having a leader of a list. That leader controls every member of Parliament, and that's just an irrefutable fact. We have to change that. It is scary to think that Irfan Ali is paid to be president, but Jagdeo controls the entire PPP party. Not just by saying it, he's the general secretary of the PPP. So Jagdeo controls who's in Parliament, while Ali is head of Guyana. How much more nonsensical a society can we have? We have to change this asinine garbage. Guyana cannot thrive, whereby we have this cow pasture foolishness whereby the herd is PNC or APFC, and another herd is PPP. No, every member of Parliament must know that they sit there at the behest of people who elected them for real on paper. That would change Guyana significantly. I also believe that what should be done is that people should stand passionately to demand that those who we pay, which will be members of the Parliament at this time, do what they should. And it's simple for us to do that. In our various communities, we can stand face to face with them and say, you're not doing what you should. Or go live and say, this person, as I would do. We have two in Linden, two in Region 10. And I say, they're not my enemies, but they are dysfunctional. And I make no bones about that. Jermaine Figueira and Devin Sears are not doing what they should in Region 10. Bottom line. How do I know that? Because Darmlal could come to Region 10 and say the 31 people in Parliament, which would be the PNC side, don't want any development. When Darmlal is in Linden as Minister of responsible for local government, and 6 garbage collecting vehicles are down. And he could say on that day that 31 people have any interest in developing Guyana. When he blocks, as far as is reported by the council, he prevents development from being had in our community. We don't want that. So with that said, I believe that constitutionally we have to have a difference, because the way this constitution is structured, we are in a constitutional dictatorship on both sides. And Guyana would never get better because of that.
Guyana would never get better because of that. Apostle Nigel London. Dr. David, I straight over to you.
Yes, and I thank my brothers for enumerating some of the things that need to be done. And so I wouldn't go into the individual thing, but I'll say 2 things. At the level of strategy, I think that we have to work out a strategy whereby we are able to put the brakes on power. That is, manners power, while at the same time mobilize to take power away from those who are poor. And political parties tend to always think about how to take away power from the opposite side and get power to them. And so therefore they allow the battering of people to take place in between elections and say, well, at election we put everything. I want to advance change in that strategy. That is to ensure that power is censored, that power is forced to deliver. We know they're not going to deliver 100%, they may not deliver 20%, but they must deliver, and we must force them to deliver, while at the same time undermining them to the point where we are going to be ready to get them out of office. It's not, we can't walk on one leg, we have to walk on both legs. How to manage power while at the same time mobilizing to take power away from the wretched people who are controlling government. And so I think that's the strategy. I think the opposition, the official opposition, is missing the beat on that, in that regard. I think they're putting all the eggs in the basket for that day when we go into the booth and spend 2 minutes or 3 minutes or 5 minutes, while forgetting that we have 3 years to go before that time. And by the time we get there, we may not have bodies to go into those booths to vote for us. So we have to try now to manage power and get power to deliver to our people. Force them, as brother Nelson Mandela said when he was being tried. You know, there comes a time in the life of any nation when you're left with but 2 choices: submit or demand. And so we have to demand now. We have to stand up like human beings and demand. You know, we're not going to get what we want with the first demand, but we continue demanding. And while we are demanding, we are mobilizing to pick them out of power. The question is what to replace them with. And that has always been the question. And Brother London has touched on it there. This is where issues of constitutional reform and so on come in. And so we have to walk on several planks at the same time. This is no time for one-track politics. This is a time for a broad politics that includes, my brother Walter Rodney used to say, if a person can fetch 2 pounds politically, let them fetch their 2 pounds. Somebody else could fetch 5 pounds, let them fetch 5 pounds. But we all should be in this together. Fear stalks our people, and fear stalks the PPP people too. Fear stalks the land. When you govern as a dictatorship, you govern by fear, including your own people. And so therefore, we have to rise above fear. And those of us who subscribe to the politics of fearlessness, we have got to try to inject a certain kind of confidence in our people. Show them their history. Show them from whence they came. Show them the victories they overcome. That's why I said 1763 was not a rebellion, it was a revolution. It was a revolution that was synonymous with the great revolutions of that time, the American Revolution, the Asian Revolution. And say to Guyanese, you come from a people who made revolutions in an age of revolution. Tell them that February is the month when your people, without the aid of social media, without the aid of all that we have today, Kofi and his band of rebels held Berbice for weeks. That can't be a rebellion. It was a revolution that was put down by joint political and imperial force. Tell our people that they're winning. Tell our people that they're doing something. Tell them, as I do, that they're responsible for kicking that person out of iTunes News.
And
Big
it,
them up.
and this is where we officially come to an end to this segment of the program
I
and
have
to
to
end
run
the
now,
show.
Norman.
Hold on, and to end the show. But I have to have your closing remarks. And your closing remarks will have to be on your thoughts about Freddie Kissoon. He came on the program, he said, y'all want me to criticize this government about excesses. What excesses? What excesses? Norman Brown, you and others. And he went on. Today he's on Critics Show, being shouted down at, being ridiculed, being made. You see, it hurt my soul to see someone who fought to struggle for so many years, someone who was a university professor, someone who claimed that, he's an academic and he's on a show with one of the most depraved human being that doesn't even have what I can't explain. And he's being disrespected, and he's like a child. Oh, can you let me speak to the people? And so on. Your closing remarks, Apostle London. Sorry, Rickford Burke has to go. So your closing remarks on that, Rickford Burke, then Apostle London, then Dr. Hines, and then we call it a night.
Well, I've always thought that Freddie Kissoon is an opportunist. He's a racist. He's always been a racist. He's an innate racist. I think that he, over the years, used the black struggle to get attention. And now that the PUP has come to power, now that oil money is involved, and he feels he is identified now with the East Indian hegemony, and his true colors are coming out. And I don't think that he was ever with us. He has, for years, been tearing down black leaders on the pages of Kaitro News. That's his forte. I think he's one of the most obnoxious and odious, poisonous characters in Guyana's public square. I think he ought to be denounced. I think he's depraved. I think Leonel made the right decision. And Norman, you and I have had these conversations about Freddie Kissoon, and I think his place is with critics. That's where he belongs, in the depraved department of the public square.
Thank you very much, Apostle London, and then
Thanks for
Dr.
having me.
Hines. Thank you so much, Rickford. Thank you so much for being here. And go ahead, Apostle.
Thank you. I was just about to say thanks to Mr. Burke for being a part of the panel as well, and always for expressing himself. I have very little interest in Freddie Kissoon, and when I say little, I mean to the utmost degree, because I recognize that he functions best by presenting himself as one who is beyond reproof and without any degree of or any room for being corrected in any way. And when he sat with Kit Nascimento and Kit was saying to him that Bonham was never racist, I mean, the average person should know that, apart from those blackies without a brain who would say he was, because he did more for the Indo-Guyanese than any other leader in this country would have done. And reference to legitimacy, having Guy Bank and those places where the agricultural industry was targeted towards them as well, developing. And Freddie couldn't hold his thought and his expression. He had to attack even Nascimento and say, Bonham had to be racist, because Freddie cannot function beyond that bubble. And so when I heard about what happened and so on, and I would rarely ever read 3 lines from his articles, because I understand from his very nature, as he did on your program, he does not see any excessive behavior in this regime. Now, if Freddie cannot see excessiveness in this regarding economic disparity, regarding what happened when they locked people in Linden out of hospital, sick people, dying people, locked nurses and doctors out of hospital, and it is no other part of this country. If Freddie doesn't see that as excessive, Freddie has a problem. If he doesn't see the closing down of the entire St. John's Ambulance Brigade, knock up, everybody was fired, all of the staff, he doesn't see it as excessive. He doesn't see that when Region 10, they say they don't have enough nurses, but no nurse or student from Region 10 can matriculate into Charles Rose School of Nursing. Not a single person. They remove them from the classroom and say, you're not coming back here. Everybody else can come, but nobody from Region 10. Is that not excessive? Freddie is incapable of being described by me with any degree of caution, which I'm so I laughed and I said, well, wait to end the show. Because if I ever try to be cautious about talking about Freddie, I'd be a hypocrite, and I can't be that. Freddie is an absolute waste of my energy and my thought.
Thank you very much, Apostle Nigel. Dr. David Hines is your friend. Y'all used to eat Polari and Black Pudding, and y'all go to jail together and all of that. It's been your good friend. What do you have to say in closing?
I stand in solidarity with the brother in his hour of stress. I went through the same thing when Glenlal kicked my program out of iTunes News, and Freddie said he was consulted and he agreed with Glenlal. I am demonstrating to Freddie that I'm a human being, that I come from a people of compassion, I come from a people of love. I come from a deep place of humanity. That even someone who visited on me the same thing that is visited on him now, I stand in solidarity with him. He has a right to eat. He has a right to express his opinion. And I stand in solidarity with him with that. I am from a culture that prioritizes compassion and love. And that is why I always say, I love my people. I love my African people. I love my Guyanese people. I love my West Indian people. I love human beings. But love must begin from deep within your own self. If someone says this color means superiority, inferiority, I must say no, this color means equality. I don't believe in superiority. This color means equality. And I shall not betray this color. Not for somebody to call me a multiracial, whatever they want to call me. I shall not betray this color in the same way that I shall not betray the class from which I come. I grew up seeing my auntie, my mother migrated a long time to come to America to work and to clean those who enslaved our foreparents, to work and do the living work, as they call it. And my aunt, who raised us in our absence, she worked in the kitchens of Portuguese people. She called them mistresses of work, and she came home and she cussed the hell out of them because she wanted a job, as she said, so that I and my sisters and brothers could go and get an education. And in our memory, I want to make sure that other women do not continue to suffer the indignities that my mother and my aunt, who raised me, suffered. So when I see them throwing a Black woman in jail or kneeling on her back or spitting in her face, I remember my own mother, my own aunt. I remember all the women who mothered me in the village. I remember all the women who mothered me and sister me right now. And I recommit myself here tonight that platitudes will never define me. What must define me and what must define all of us who have put ourselves out there, Pastor, Rickford, yourself, Mark, Aubrey, all of us,
Lincoln
Lewis, our own way, we must be inspired by that path. Right? Whatever our differences, political difference, religious differences, whatever our differences, in this hour of stampede, even if we don't join our hands together, let us join our hearts together. And to say we have a rendezvous with justice. We have a date with freedom. And we have come too far to stop now. We are going to quarrel, we are going to disagree sometimes, we are going to, but at the end of the day, we have come too far. 180 odd years out of that plantation gate, we have come too far. We may still be twisted somewhere in our thoughts and our minds, but we can strengthen that crookedness. We have come too far now to step back and allow those with their greed and their lust to make us step away from the journey that has been foisted on us. We are the children of Africa. We are the children of African Guyanese. We are the children of Guyana. We are the children of pioneers. We are the sons and daughters who have been called upon time and time again to set the world on the right path. Because they kick us down to the bottom. And every time we rise, we raise them up. We are the conscience. We the poor and the powerless. We the black and the dark people. We are the conscience of the world. And so it must be. Tonight, we came here in peace, and we are going to leave in peace. Thanks to you, my brother. Thanks to you, my brother. And thanks to all the brothers and sisters who are bearing witness to this moment of demolition. And that when we rise, we will make sure that no more will bulldozers haunt the spirit of our people. Gone. Good night.
Gratitude is a must, Apostle Nigel London. Thank you very much, Dr. David Hines, and of course, Rickford Burke. We were supposed to be here for it is 9 minutes to, to 2 hours. And I want to say how appreciative I am that you have stayed here and that you have fulfilled that mandate and requirement in this struggle. Words are inadequate to express. As Guyana descended into an apartheid state, I believe this program tells the world that it has and it is an apartheid state. I want to thank you once again, and do have a good night as we continue this struggle without letting up. We continue this struggle, and we will not give up. Dr. Hines, Apostle Nigel London, Rickford Burke, a moment in time that will be preserved forever here on Voice of the Diaspora. Thank you very much for being here.
Tomorrow with all of this war and sorrows, no you we all. How are we gonna survive if we keep taking one another's life? Like there's no tomorrow with all of this war and sorrows. Well, throughout things I'm one I have to act when I pray. Judge I am the only no we see another day. Babylon and gunmen indulging gun. Some are shoot from bottom house and some from top stories. The streets is the place where dead bodies lay. Most that have died innocently. Well, the righteous can't say them free. Gunshot a leak when cop make them roots. To kill all bad human beings so policemen get paid. Hear what we ask and listen on time and sing again. How are we gonna survive if we keep taking one another's life? Like there's no tomorrow with all of this war and sorrows. No, we all. How are we gonna survive if we keep taking one another's life? Like there's no tomorrow with all of this war and sorrows. Well, just take a look at all the situation of how many people are faced starvation, while Babylon are invest so many million to build up a nuclear ammunition. Man like we self a do the invention. Act like if they just want the world done. The two warring parties don't want no peace. Seems to me they are praising the beast. Praise Jah instead. Please, how are we gonna survive if we keep taking one another's life? seem like with the Satan thought and him evil style. Live with love and unity in all your hearts. This in each other shall tear us apart. To the life Jah give us, boy it's so short. You better make a fresh start. And if we cry, how are we gonna survive if we keep taking one another?